Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Motsoaledi, who will be briefing us on the challenges and the update on the border management situation. He is going to be supported by the officials, and I will just name them: the Director General of Home Affairs, Mr. Tommy Makode, and the Commissioner of Police. Is actually acting for the police, is the commissioner in charge of the border policing, is General Shelembe. And next to General Shelembe, we also have the acting commissioner of SARS responsible for customs, is Mr. Bayas Theron. We also have officials from the intelligence coordinator, who is also with us, who will be assisting with the briefing. We also have the project manager, who is responsible for the Border Management Authority, Jeannie Ravela. And at this point, I will hand over to the minister. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Pumla, for the introductions. I'm sure because I'm standing very far from everybody else, it might be safer to remove my mask. When Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma was here yesterday, was presenting yesterday, I heard people pleading that the mask be removed for the sake of the people who will understand only sign language, so that they can read our lips. So I'll remove it for the time being. The Director General of the Department of Home Affairs, Mr. Tommy Makode, and the commissioners of SARS and police and other Directors General from the National Joint Operations and Intelligence Structure, commonly called net joints, members of the public listening through various platforms, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me take this opportunity to extend a special welcome to Mr. Tommy Makode as the new Director General of the Department of Home Affairs, because this is his first press conference in the new responsibility. Welcome, DG. I also want to extend apologies from the Deputy Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Njabulo Nzuza. He will not be joining us today, and perhaps maybe for the next 2 weeks or so, because yesterday he tested positive for COVID-19. He's isolating at home. He's still symptomless. Just quarantined at home, away from the rest of the family. We wish him a very speedy recovery during these trying times. We have called this press conference to achieve two objectives. Number one, to inform members of the public who will be crossing our land borders from the 2nd to the 14th of January 2021 about the plans in place to facilitate smooth movement. Our message will specifically target those who will be crossing the border into South Africa from our neighboring countries. But number two, we want to provide facts about the port operations, especially as it pertains to the busiest land port of entry in our country, the Beitbridge border post, because it became apparent last week that lots of things are really not understood the way they should. In the Christmas last week, from the 23rd to the 26th of December 2020, events at Beitbridge generated a lot of news around the country, spilling into our neighboring countries and even going abroad. Needless to say, the massive congestion that was observed at Beitbridge was quite unusual, even by the standards of this time of the year, where we usually get lots of people crossing the border. But what generated news, which unfortunately were mostly negative, was the debate about what people thought was the reason behind the congestion. Many factually inaccurate stories peppered the news and caused a lot of confusion. Among these inaccuracies were claims that the government, particularly the Department of Home Affairs, failed to plan ahead and should have foreseen that this year there will be a lot of travelers crossing the border back to their homes into neighboring countries because they never had an opportunity to go home during for a long time because of the lockdown. It was also claimed that as a result of the lack of planning, 4 or 5 truck drivers died of dehydration while waiting in the queue because the state failed to provide water and ablution facilities. The Department of Home Affairs was also accused of scapegoating on truck drivers and blaming them for what is in essence failure of the state to plan. Another common narrative was that many more people died there because of hunger, thirst, and sheer exhaustion as a result of the 3-day congestion. Figures of the people who died or who are said to have died varied from 5, 8, sometimes 10. I even received a phone inquiry about 15 truck drivers who are supposed to have died at Beitbridge border post over those 3 days. Now, these figures were repeated with almost every news bulletin, every news analysis, and other programs all over the media. Today, I've just seen another statement which I might visit later. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if we are to solve the country's problems, which affect us all, I believe it's important to sift fact from fiction. And since numbers don't lie, we wish to provide statistics today for context. Listening to the media last week, it was generally accepted as an incontestable fact that this year there were many more travelers who crossed Beitbridge than it was the case in the previous years. But our statistics show otherwise. Our stats, because we capture stats every year at the borders, our stats gives a different set of facts than what was generally broadcast last week. By December 2019, or rather in December 2019, there were 368,895 travelers that crossed Beitbridge border post. In contrast, by the 27th of December, that means just 3 days ago, when we calculated from the first of the month, there were only 103,224 people who crossed Beitbridge. If I have to put it in simple terms, only 27% of travelers who crossed Beitbridge last year did so this year. Meaning the number of people who crossed this year were only 27% of those who crossed last year and, of course, the previous years. So it is out of question to claim that this year there were many people who crossed Beit Bridge and were not planned for, and that's the results of the congestion. Well, the question obviously will arise as to what then caused the congestion if the number of travelers were much fewer this year than the previous years, as in statistics. Well, it's a well-known fact that Botswana introduced tight lockdown regulations and a strict curfew to protect her own citizens from the ravages of COVID-19. And many other countries, of course, took measures to protect their citizens, measures in the way they deemed fit to protect their own citizens. And this happened globally in many instances. But many trucking companies found it unprofitable to cross into the region through Botswana. The South African border post with Botswana, which is closest to Beit Bridge, is Groblersbrug, the Groblersbrug border post. Usually at this time of the year, Groblersbrug is used as an overflow area when Beit Bridge cannot cope with the number of trucks that goes through. But this year, it was the other way around. And none of us, of course, anticipated something like that because it was happening for the first time. It was the other way around. Trucking companies diverted their trucks away from Groblersbrug to Beit Bridge because they could not accept the waiting times imposed by the COVID protocols in Botswana, as we have already mentioned. And our figures, as I said, they don't lie. They are a testimony to this. In December last year, 6,706 trucks went through Groblersbrug. But by the 27th of December this year, that means by 3 days ago, the last date on which we got statistics, only 2,968 trucks had gone through Groblersbrug. This means that only 44% of the total number of trucks processed last year went through Groblersbrug this year. Now, in contrast, when we move to Beit Bridge, 19,800 trucks went through Beit Bridge in December 2019. Compared to this year, by the 27th of December, again 3 days ago, there were 21,800. So a simple analysis of these figures will tell you that in December this year, 3,738 fewer trucks went through Groblersbrug. And at least 2,000 of them found their way to Beit Bridge, and hence the congestion. Unfortunately, with this increased number of trucks, many truck drivers at Beit Bridge panicked. They abandoned all the prior arrangements which were made with the authority for smooth flow of traffic, so as not to impede movement on the road. So by the time trucks leave the holding area, most of this administrative work has been completed, which will result in a smooth transition at the border post. Last week, I had news. Maybe it's because of something was lost in interpretation. That I said lots of people did not have documents to go through the border, and I think they thought we're talking about documents of human beings like passports, like visas. No, I was talking about this trade and SARS administrative documents, which is a matter of must before any truck can be allowed to go through a border post. And that is practiced worldwide. It's not only here. But unfortunately, in these 3 days, which we are talking about here, the holding areas were abandoned and trucks were parked on the road. They even occupied lanes of incoming traffic, consequently even blocking traffic that was coming from the side of Zimbabwe heading into South Africa. It was quite chaotic, as we have noticed, and many of you have seen this on TV. Now, it is not apportioning blame to truck companies when these facts are stated. They are just facts. They are just facts, and they are backed by figures which I've given. Not spin them in any other way, as unfortunately the freight industry has been trying to do over the past week. Now, in the halting areas or the truck stops, there is water and there are ablution facilities. Now, when you abandon the holding area with all these facilities and head straight to N1 and park on the road and blame the state for not providing water and ablution facilities, you are actually being disingenuous and dishonest. But unfortunately, people who are listening and who don't know these normal arrangements will of course believe you. And since people find it very easy to blame the state, especially nowadays, they definitely did so. And of course, putting the blame on the state became the main news bulletins over those 3 days. It is as if the adults who were driving these trucks are ordinary schoolboys with no responsibility of their own, who need to be shepherded every single moment they are on the road. Unfortunately, to add more flavor to this type of narrative, the issue of death was brought into the picture. And unfortunately, in a very unfortunate manner. It was reported that 4 or 5 truck drivers, depending on who you were listening to, have died of dehydration, hunger, or exhaustion while waiting in their trucks. Now, ladies and gentlemen, death is a very emotive issue which flares up passions to those who are listening. These emotions easily turn into anger because it is traumatic and psychologically debilitating to be listening to stories of death continuously. This, of course, needless to say, generate anger against the state because it is generally regarded that it is the state which is responsible of such death. I want to be understood. We are not advocating that where death occurs, it must be hidden from the public. That is not what we are saying. But the story about the alleged death of truck drivers was promptly broadcast by the Road Freight Association, and of course, as expected, picked up by the media and distributed all over the country. and our neighboring countries, and of course even countries abroad, because we got inquiries in the Department of Home Affairs to that effect. And needless to say, it will go into history books, where it will be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to expunge, even when new facts come to the fore. Now, the Road Freight Association is an important stakeholder in the border environment because they are the owners of the trucks and hence are to be taken seriously, as they should. So strong was their message about the death of 5 truck drivers that they even called upon the president of the country to intervene. Now, as I said, once you mention the issue of death, it goes into history books. It so happened that just an hour ago, a statement has been released by 2 freight associations, not only in South Africa, but in the whole region and in the whole continent, if I'm not mistaken, who are rehearsing this story of 5 truck drivers who died and calling upon the state to bring an end to this. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm narrating this story because, as I said, death is a very emotive issue, something that we don't want to see. So in our bid to ascertain the veracity of the claims placed strongly in the media, in the media space by the Road Freight Association, the Department of Home Affairs wrote to the CEO of the association asking him to provide the names of the truck drivers who he had said had died at the border. Yesterday, the CEO referred us to a police officer in Limpopo instead of giving us the names. Well, we phoned this police officer and he told us that he doesn't know where all this is coming from and why we are being referred to him. So the department contacted the Department of Health in Limpopo, who usually work with the police at the border whenever there is a death case. Both the police and the Limpopo Department of Health have a record of a death of 1 truck driver, which we all know about, and we have got the name here, and his family actually disclosed what the cause of death was. So the family knew the cause of the unfortunate demise of their loved one, and they never tried to play politics. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Beitbridge is an area of intense human activity where there are many people involved in diverse activities. There are truck drivers there, there are taxis there are people who hike, there are hawkers, there are people who have crossed the Limpopo River to come and receive treatment in the neighboring hospitals in South Africa, especially Musina. Of course, there's a lot of wheeling and dealing in that type of environment. And it will be expecting a miracle to believe that such an area of intense human activity won't have some form of mortality at some time or the other. Indeed, most of the people who might have demised at Beitbridge, if I may add, do not do so because there is congestion. It's a whole year event which has got nothing to do with road congestion, as it was widely reported over the Christmas period. The border area is regarded as an area covering 10 kilometers inland, a radius of 10 kilometers from the borderline. In the case of Beitbridge, the area we call the border stretches from the Limpopo River inland 10 kilometers into the town of Musina. So apart from the truck driver who demised on the 23rd of December 2020, that is the day on which the congestion peaked, the other deaths occurred long before the increased activity associated with holiday season. So there was, of course, some mortality which had nothing to do with truck driving, which, as I said, occurs throughout the whole year. And in the month of December, it occurred on the 8th of December, on the 13th of December, on the 14th of December, and on the 22nd of December. As you can see, it was long before the period of the congestion. On the 23rd and the 24th, the death that occurred, as we said, is the one unfortunate truck driver which I've already mentioned, and 2 other people who have got nothing to do with the truck industry. But of course, for obvious reasons, I won't be able to disclose their cause of death. And we have got their names. That's why we wanted to chase the names of these 5 truck drivers, because we have got the names of all the others. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to reiterate, death is a very sensitive issue. It must not easily be spoken about and be quoted and put in the public space without facts. An hour ago, as I've said, I just saw a new media statement released by 2 other trucking associations, freight associations. You have a copy? See, come in and look for it here, unless we have got a copy, which is proving what I've already said, that once something like this is placed in the media area, it sticks forever, it goes into history books, and is picked up by everybody, and they pick it as if it's an original story from them. And this is quite unfortunate. And that's why we wanted to know, who are these people? What are their names? So I'll really appeal. Oh, no, here it was hiding under my documents, I'm sorry. Yes, this statement was released today on the 30th of December by the Federation of Eastern and Southern African Road Transport Association, FESATA, and the South African Association of Freight Forwarders, SAAFF, who are the key players in Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, the AFCFTA. And again, they were talking about these tragic deaths of truck drivers. So the story has stuck in. Now, regarding the plans from the 2nd of January 2021, which is in about 3 days' time, to the 14th of January, the middle of the month, on which we believe activity at the borders will not be very intense, we hope that there will be common sense cooperation between the freight associations and the authorities, which doesn't include propaganda. It will serve neither the country, the freight industry, nor the state if we continue on the propaganda mode. Well, one of the facts that are well known is that SARS on the South African side, and you can confirm with the commissioner here, are fully automated and can process as many trucks per hour on any one day. While unfortunately, on the Zimbabwean side, it is still largely manual process, with only trucks per hour being able to be processed, and at most 30 trucks at peak performance. So the South African side cannot send more trucks than the Zimbabwean side can handle. So when truckers leave the holding area to get hastily to the border with the vain hope that they'll be able to pressurize South Africa the South African authorities to process them quickly as possible, they are actually expecting a miracle, because the system works in a cooperative way, like a relay race. In the relay race, you don't issue the baton to the next person before they are ready or before you have reached them. So the truck industry need to understand this and sit down and cooperate with us. And I'm happy that this letter, apart from quoting the issue of 5 deaths, which we are still looking for, is calling for cooperation. And we agree with them very well, with the authorities. But they are also calling for a PPP in the form of one-stop border post. I want to report that this process of PPP is already on. Those who follow issues will realize that we've issued the government gazette about the one-stop border post policy, and we're asking for public comments, which will close by the 28th of February, at which time we'll now finalize the policy. So it's already there. It's something that the Cabinet of South Africa has been dealing with since 2018. It's not something that has just emerged now, and it's already far advanced, that we are planning for a one-stop border post in a form of a PPP. So what the South African Association of Freight Forwarders are asking for is already something that is in the pipeline and is being planned. Now, the following are our plans for the expected activity when people return back to the country. And these plans are approved by NetJoints, the National Joint Operation and Intelligence Structure of Government. Number 1, the Department of Home Affairs will deploy an additional 160 officials at the 6 busiest land ports of entry to process returning travelers until the 14th of January. And this border post, where the additional 160 officials will be sent, is the Beit Bridge with Zimbabwe, Lebombo with Mozambique, Oshoek with the Kingdom of Eswatini, Maseru Bridge with Lesotho, Fixback with Lesotho, and Kopfontein with Botswana. Number 2, another 60 additional immigration law enforcement officers will be deployed to support the South African National Defence Force high-risk areas along the borderline where people have a tendency to cross illegally into South Africa. The immigration officers and the soldiers will not be there to stop people from coming into South Africa. I must emphasize that. They won't be there to say, no, please don't come into South Africa. No, but they will definitely be there to insist, without any fear or favor, that anybody wishing to visit South Africa must use the official gates of entry and produce all the requisite documentation. Otherwise, they simply won't be allowed in. Number 3, The Department of Health, via its Port Health unit, will deploy additional Port Health officials to all ports of entry to ensure that only travelers with valid PCR tests are allowed into the country. Alternatively, those without PCR test will be subjected to a rapid antigen test at the point of entry. On their own costs. I must emphasize that. Each one will have to pay for their own test. South Africa will not allow any traveler into the country without a valid PR test or antigen test for COVID-19. I'm sure you're aware that all countries are doing that around the world. And so we are no exception. As announced last week by the Director General of the Department of Health, only truck drivers are exempted from this test requirement. And this was the case right at the beginning of the lockdown, that we have never bothered truck drivers about this test. And that's why we asked the Department of Health to remove that provision. But any other traveler is warned once more that they will never be allowed in our country without producing the authentic COVID-19 tests. Number 4, more than 259 Port Health officials will be deployed to all ports of entry. An additional 278 community service personnel on contract will also be deployed. The National Health Laboratory Services, or the NHLS, will enlist private laboratories to provide additional support for testing. And the South African Military Health Services has been requested to provide 73 additional military health personnel to help in the testing. So nobody could come and claim that they cannot test because there are no services. There will be ample services at the border post according to this plan. Number 5, the provincial joints of Prof joints have been activated for policing and will conduct roadblocks and vehicle control points within the border law enforcement area. Number 6, provincial authorities will conduct roadblocks mainly in Limpopo, in the Free State, in Mpumalanga, and KwaZulu-Natal. And let me take this opportunity to announce that the Kosi Bay border post between KwaZulu-Natal and Mozambique, which has been closed since the beginning of the lockdown, will be opened on the 1st of January this year. Sorry, excuse me. This year is still 2020. On the 1st of January 2021, excuse me, the post will be open, maybe simply on New Year's Day, to start functioning. It has not been functioning since March this year. Number 7, the Cross-Border Road Transport Agency will also deploy inspectors at Bait Bridge, Lebombo, Motsoaledi Bridge, and Fixback for the same duration as we have said of 2 weeks. That means from the 2nd to at least the 14th of January. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to the presentation.
Thank you very much, Minister. At this point, we'll take questions Is there any questions?
Thank you, DG. There are no questions on our side.
Okay. Yes, behind. Yes, you can proceed.
Good morning, Minister.
Ma'am.
I just wanted to ask this question on the issue of the Beitbridge border post. Sorry, firstly, this is Mangoba from ENCA.
I cannot hear. I'm sure yes.
Mangoba Mkunu from ENCA.
Yes,
And
but you must use the
use the, use the mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Minister, on the issue of the Beitbridge border post chaos that we saw last week, I think you have made it quite clear in your statement and given us the numbers in terms of what really transpired there. But what we're getting, the sense that we're getting is that government is saying that we are not at all to blame for the chaos that happened there. In fact, it was, more than anything, an issue of logistics. So, who is the minister saying should take the blame for this? Are you saying that it's actually the freight industry that should be held accountable for this? And then just secondly, in terms of the issue of going back, you indicated that you're expecting these volumes to pick up. I mean, are you confident that we won't see the chaos that we saw at the border this time around with the plan that you say you've presented and that has been approved by the Command Council?
Thank you. Is that all? I think, Minister, you were very clear. That's the only question. Oh, there is one. Thanks.
Thank you, DG. We do have two questions. The first one is from Alex Mitchley from News 24. They have asked, what was the cause of death for the truck drivers on the 23rd of December, as well as those who died earlier this month? We have another question from Patrick O'Leary from Fleetwatch Truck Magazine to Minister Motsoaledi. You have referred to past statements by the various associations as propaganda. This implies an adversarial them and us scenario. Is there a willingness by government for all affected parties to link hands and to work together to avoid what we may have seen? To avoid what we may have seen, not only recently at Beitbridge, but also previously at Libombo border post and others. Also, you made no mention of COVID-19. Thank you. You made no mention of COVID-19 testing procedures, which were not in place last year, having an impact on traffic congestion at Beitbridge. What effect did the COVID-19 test procedure have on the holdups? Were the test systems and personnel sufficient to handle the traffic volumes? And I think that's
it
for now.
Okay, I think Minister can respond. There are quite a few. We'll take another round.
The first question is whether we are blaming only truck drivers and the state takes no responsibility. I was not trying to apportion blame to anybody. I was just mentioning the facts because I said we need to know what happened if we are to avoid it. Of course, on the side of the state is that when truck drivers left their holding areas, there were no traffic officials to shepherd them back for that day. Yes, that's where the state has gone wrong. And the reasons are that traffic officials who used to do this work and who did it in November thought now they've established a clear method of dealing with congestion there. And they were deployed elsewhere. As you are aware, it was during the time of the year when we were expecting lots of accidents and fatalities on the road and traffic. By the time we realized that we need them back and call them in, of course, it was after many hours. They did come back, and the situation was so bad that we even have to call the army. And they deployed 36 soldiers to help. And the DG, Mr. Makode, was there all the time, trying to see. Some of the trucks broke on the road, and of course, I accept blame for the state there. because it took a long time to get the huge trucks from the army to come and pull them away. Because some of the truck drivers claim that their trucks have actually broken the road. And we are not convinced that some of them were broken. They just wanted to park there. And so there is blame on both sides of the state. But here, I was just mentioning that we wouldn't have had to have this disaster if people did not leave the holding areas. Now, of course, we have learned a lesson that we should not believe that once we establish a process with the truck industry, we must believe then they will follow it forever. They've shown us that they need to be policed continuously, every minute, that there must always be traffic police, maybe even the army. It's not something that we thought should be necessary, but it looks to be necessary at the present moment. Whether we are confident that there will be no chaos, yes, we are, but only if people stick to their plans. If any other of the stakeholders does not stick to the plans again, what we saw might actually happen again. I mean, if a huge truck or many huge trucks just come and block 2 lanes and even block the incoming lane before you know what's happening, there will be chaos. But we are hoping this will not be allowed to happen, because now, after seeing what has happened, we'll make sure that officials are there to make sure that people stick to the protocols as they happen normally. The cause of death for the truck driver on the 24th, unfortunately, we won't be able to do that. It is inconceivable to stand up in public and talk about the cause of death of somebody without the family disclosing it. I'm sure you are aware that that's normal practice in terms of the National Health Act. I happen to have been in health. I know that very well. You don't stand up in public and blare up and say so-and-so died of this, so-and-so died of that, unless the family themselves do so. And the cause of death of other people, as I said, we do have their names and we do know fairly what has happened, but we cannot be in a position to disclose that, as I said, for obvious reasons. Now, the willingness of government to work together, that's of course what we are calling for. We are always willing to work together. When I went to Beitbridge in November, we were calling for this cooperation. There was this type of chaos in November when we rushed there. We rushed because there was chaos. It was not a peak holiday season, but there were chaos because once again, truck drivers at that time left their holding areas and went into the road and parked there. Immediately when they heard that there is a hold up in Botswana. And that's why I rushed there. And there was no way we could have solved it without cooperation. Yes, we are calling for cooperation. Everybody must play their role. Everybody must play their part and not just say, no, I will do this, the state will do that. It's like the fight against COVID. We are calling for cooperation with everybody. There are people who believe only the state must stop COVID. They don't have to put on masks, they don't have to sanitize, they don't have to do anything. So the same as at the borders, people must know that everybody has got a responsibility. And more than all the other people, the trucking industry, because congestion happens more often due to trucks rather than due to human beings. As I've given you the figures here, that there were much, much fewer human beings at Beitbridge than there was in the previous years. Now, the truck industry, including the message I've received here, was blaming the COVID protocols, the test procedures for the congestion, and they say the minister is not mentioning it. I'll tell you why. When there was congestion, massive congestion in Beitbridge in November, there was no testing from truck drivers. We've never demanded it. It was not there. But there was congestion, which caused the whole minister to go there. And of course, my counterpart from Zimbabwe also flew down. We met there. It was about truckers leaving the holding areas It was not about testing procedures because they were not there. So when the same situation takes place again, we cannot say, no, it's the testing procedures, because we have seen it before when people leave the holding areas. And if I'm not mistaken, if my memory serves me very well, it will have been for the third time that holding areas are left and it leads into congestion. I still remember the other time, but I forgot the date. So it is not the testing. And as I've said, anyway, we've asked the Minister of Health not to require testing for truck drivers, but will definitely require testing for all the other individuals, the other travelers who are traveling in cars and pedestrians walking on foot, etc., will definitely require testing from them. So we do not believe that the testing should be abandoned as it is being claimed, because we are here balancing between the free flow of traffic but the safety of people who still want to live. And I think the travelers also still want to live. Thank you very much.
I think we'll entertain one more last round. We can then relieve the minister. I think we'll take one last round. Mangoba, you are covering for everybody. Okay.
Minister, I just want to deal with the issue of the curfew and the airlines, that now the curfew has been adjusted. And it's coming at a great cost, of course, to many of those companies, those airlines that, of course, were operating at hours that were outside of this curfew before. So is government looking at adjusting this for airlines to still fly late, or do you have to stick to the rescheduling of flights?
Okay. I think that's the... Is there a question? Okay. Matigwen? Yeah.
Thank you, DG. We have 5 questions.
5?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. The first one is from Alex Mitchley. Oh, no, excuse me. We already read that question. The first one is from Bongiwe Zwane from Newsroom Africa. They've asked, hi, Minister Motsoaledi, as much as it's one truck driver who has died at the Beitbridge border post, can you admit that the issues there require urgent attention? We are heading towards an influx of people coming back into the country. Have you beefed up personnel to ensure that the chaos at the border post is avoided? And the next one is from Angelo Copella from CGTN. When are you planning to meet with the road freight associations to iron out your differences? The next one is from Nazir Mohammed, from Glow TV. Are there extra checks being taken for all traveling from from European countries entering South Africa, given the high rate of COVID-19 cases there? The next one is from Vickers Berger from Netvac 24. Minister, can you give an indication of the volume of international flights arriving in and leaving the country? Which airports has the most traffic? Can you please give statistics on how many flights are arriving and leaving the country? Also, please indicate which countries have closed their borders for South Africa. Have we closed our borders for any countries? If so, which countries? The next one is from Norma Bulani from Rapeleng, from SABC News. Would it be suitable to consider a joint press briefing with all stakeholders, especially health, to avoid blaming other departments' inconsistencies? Can you please share your understanding regarding what it means that that a traveler without a 72 PCR certificate will be allowed at their cost to take an antigen rapid test. Thank you.
The last question, can I what?
Oh, would it be suitable to consider a joint press briefing with all stakeholders, especially the Department of Health, to avoid blaming other departments? And can you please share your understanding regarding what it means that a traveler without a 72 PCR certificate will be allowed at their cost to take an antigen rapid test?
Thank you. I think this is the last round, and I think Minister will cover most of the questions. Thank you.
Yeah, the first question about rescheduling of flights. Let me explain the role of various departments. The Department of Home Affairs is responsible for declaring an area as a port of entry. That means as to whether an area is going to be a border area through which people come into the country. That is declared by the Minister of Home Affairs. Whether it's an airport or a seaport or a land port of entry, the Minister of Home Affairs will declare that area. And once it's declared, other government departments have got their very important roles. The role of Home Affairs is just to make sure that people coming in through that gate have got requisite documents. Usually it's a passport and a visa. That's the only thing that Home Affairs check. All the others are done by the other departments. Like the issue of rescheduling of flights is an area of the Ministry of Transport. It's all the other organizations like AXA and all that, which report to the Ministry of Transport, not the Department of Home Affairs. Whether a plane arrives at whatever time or whether it leaves, all that Home Affairs is interested in is to see, are the people inside that plane, when they emerge from the plane and get into the country, are they allowed to, in terms of a passport, a valid passport, machine-readable passport, and a valid visa if he comes from a country where a visa is required. The issue of COVID-19 is done by Port Health. Home Affairs officials are not trained to understand PCR certificates and antigen tests. It's done by Port Health officials. So I just want to clear that. So the rescheduling of flights because of the curfew will be determined and be known by the Minister of Transport. Bongiwe Zwani from Newsroom Africa. Whether we have urgently beefed up personnel, I thought I've actually mentioned. I don't know whether I need to repeat it. I've mentioned the personnel in numbers from health, from the Home Affairs, from the army, from the police. I've actually mentioned them. I'm sure Bongiwe must just check my speech to see that we have actually mentioned the beefing up of numbers at the borders, and I've even mentioned the borders, which are very busy where that will be done. A question from Angelo, whether we plan to meet with the Road Freight Association. Yes, I did ask the Minister of Transport, because the Road Freight Associations are also entities that do not report to Home Affairs but to the Department of Transport. Home Affairs is linked at the hip with Road Freight Association when they start going through our ports of entry. That's all. Otherwise, all the other things, because remember that freight associations are not only truckers that go through the borders. Even inside the country, trucks do work and they are licensed and all that. And so that is done by the Ministry of Transport. And I have asked that he organize a meeting for us so that we see how we work together at the borders. Extra checks for all travelers from Europe. we have been doing this. It's not new. When we went down to log level 1, from the 1st of October, we were doing checks. We said nobody is going to enter the country without a valid COVID-19 certificate, whether they are from Europe or ever. And if you may remember, we even had a list of some 26 countries where we're not allowing ordinary travelers, except a certain category of travelers, to come into South Africa. And we said even those who were allowed from those countries cannot come in without a valid COVID-19 certificate, which is not more than 72 hours old. We have been doing that, and we are just continuing with it. Eventually, we no longer red-listed countries as we did. We said everybody is allowed in South Africa, but there must be a valid COVID-19 certificate. And so I'm emphasizing, whether it's from Europe and from any other country, we actually demand such a certificate, as we have been doing from the 1st of October. We have never changed that, and we are still going to go on with it. From News 24, these are statistics that we don't keep in the Department of Home. We don't have at hand, but we can get them. The volume of international flights, as I said, it will easily be provided by AXA, because they are the ones who allow those flights to come in, and parking space and all that. They are the ones who allow the scheduling. So as to how many flights are arriving, we can get that information, but it's not something that is readily available. That we do have on our fingerprints, because it's not something that we deal with every day. Have we closed any border for any country? No, we haven't. And I think Minister Dlamini Zuma yesterday actually emphasized that borders are not closed. The only borders which we closed are the ones we closed at the beginning of the lockdown, if you remember. Out of the 8 airports in the country, 3 were functioning from the beginning of the lockdown, and Dr. Dlamini Zuma announced that those 3 will still be functioning. Sorry, excuse me, not 8, 11. Out of 11 international airports in the country, 3 have been functioning, and they'll remain functioning, as you know. The 8 are not airports, are seaports. All of them are open for cargo, not for human, for passengers, no, but for cargo. And they've all been opened, all of them, when we went to lockdown level 1. The land border post, as you might have heard before, were 72 in number. Out of that 72 land border post, excuse me, there were 53. 72 is the total ports of entry in the country, the seaports, the airports, and the land ports. The land ports are 53. Out of 53, we closed down 35 at the beginning of the lockdown, and remain with only 18 border posts that have been functioning. So every country has got a border post that is functioning. We didn't close to any country, etc. We just closed the certain border posts. And why did we close them? Number one, there was no economic activity in those border posts. Number two, they did not have all the other departments like SARS, like agriculture, like health. When you go to them, you just used to find only 1 or 2 Home Affairs officials or police at most, a police personnel standing there. So that's why we closed them. But since we opened Sunny Pass between us and Lesotho, between KwaZulu-Natal and Lesotho, it was opened subsequently. And I'm just announcing that on New Year's Day, we'll open Kosi Bay. So it will be a total of 20 border posts out of 53 that are functioning. The others will remain closed. But there's no country that could say all their borders have been closed into South Africa. The last question is very tricky. My understanding of what it means for a traveler to take an antigen test. My understanding is that every traveler plans to travel unless it's an emergency, like people who are sick, who have never stopped from coming into the border. We have never done so. People who have got health emergencies have always been coming in. Those who plan their journey are advised to obtain a 72-hour PCR certificate. Now, when we realize that there are those who could not afford it or who, by some reason or the other, would not have done it, we introduced this antigen test. It was introduced specifically when Lesotho government told us that the Basotho cannot afford the PCR test and they want another means. And the Department of Health immediately rushed to introduce the rapid antigen. It so happened that when they were making this request, the World Health Organization had already pre-qualified an antigen test. And that's why we are offering it to those who may not have a PCR test. But it's an advantage for a traveler to obtain a PCR test before leaving, before starting to travel, because then it will be smoother at the border. They don't have to wait for that antigen test, which can take 15 minutes. So my understanding is that, yes, and my further understanding is that we have given figures of the number of people who will be deployed by the Department of Health. And we've even said further, the National Health Laboratory Services will deploy private providers, that means private laboratories, so that there are ample areas where you can have a test. And of course, at your own cost, when you arrive at the border post. What we will not accept is for people to plead poverty and say, I'm so poor that I cannot afford this test. Of course, poverty is something that is very painful. But unfortunately, the fact are that we cannot allow you in if you don't have that test. Because if you do, then why will anybody else want to produce the test when they know that if you plead poverty, you just don't produce it? We are faced with a situation of war here on COVID-19. Everybody must take their responsibility. And all countries around the world are demanding a COVID-19 test. All of them. I've never heard of any country, unfortunately up to now, that is not doing that. They all do. Even with the congestion at Beit Bridge, Zimbabwe was insisting on a 48-hour, not 72, a test that is no older than 48 hours. We were demanding 72. So it's something that countries do to protect their citizens, and there is nothing else. There's no replacement of that, unfortunately. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, yes. I forgot that. Yeah.
Thanks, DG. I think there was a question relayed by Noma Bulane and Rapelang as to whether the decisions that were being announced by the minister, and the question was, why are we not having a joint press briefing? And I think at the beginning of the media briefing, the DG, GCIS indicated that the minister is joined by General Shilembe from the South African Police Service, but also by Steron from Customs, but also in your midst, Ambassador Msimang from our intelligence communities, and then Major General also from the SAPS. These decisions were taken at a meeting of the net joints that was held over a period of 2 days on the 28th and the 29th. And the decision that was taken was that the Minister of Home Affairs will then communicate these decisions to the public and the media. Thank you.
Thanks, teacher.
I'm just waiting to thank you. We have come to the end of this media briefing, and thank you very much for joining us in this important briefing. Thank you, Minister. We adjourn.